What's up, Coach?
Hope you don't mind me having my shake.
No, you're good.
Yeah?
All right, man, good to see you.
I'm good.
Everything good? We got the whole crew here. Coach, appreciate you doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad you're here. Stay
Excited to have
college.
you on. Yeah. I want to start with biggest difference for you between year one, implementing your system, and now year two, spring ball. We were just talking offline about, you feeling like this is a really good spring for you guys.
Yeah.
How's it been different for you?
Well, I would tell you, I would say the hardest thing sometimes as a coach is to really, especially when you're new, is to really figure out what the capabilities and limitations of your players are.
Yeah.
And having a full year with our roster that's really clear of what we're capable of. And then to be able to build on that, you know what I mean? Because obviously in football, not to be cliche, but you want to avoid putting people in positions where limitations could expose. And every football player has them. And so let's not ask players to do things, like that. But to know that we can specifically and intentionally work to improve any limitation a player might have through a year, put them in position to succeed still with, doing the things they do well. To really know that about our players allowed us, at least going into this offseason, a ton of intentionality with what we want to install, the drills that we want to do, how we want to practice. We were able to have a ton of reflection on the season. You're watching the cut-ups and going back and revisiting, hey, why do we run these plays, this concept? Here are some critical things that after watching these cut-ups that we know we want to get better at. So there's just a ton of familiarity with what we're trying to do on offense, who the players are, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. Intellectually, physically, all those sort of things. And it's just your growth can really get a lot more intentional, and the trajectory of it can be really, really steep.
Yeah. You were with Coach Leipold for a long time, and I know it would have taken a lot to get you to leave, right? And this place was it for you. What were the things that made this the place you wanted to be for the next step in your career?
Yeah, well, you and I had spoke a little bit about this offline, and I think inevitably the older you get, I think the more you recognize, you have a lot of self-reflection about who you are and what you want to be, known for and what you want to be a part of. And so I've been mature enough to know now what that is for me, and a blue collar mentality, a chip on your shoulder, a physical, right, a competitive environment are things that I know that I want to be a part of. That's that's who I am. And to go through that with Coach Leipold for 11 years at the 3 different schools we were doing that, and to make sure in interactions with Coach Franklin to recognize that's how he runs this program. And those are questions, right? Like you don't know those sort of things, and so I wanted to be sure that those were what he's about, and through the communication, the interview process, and getting to know him, through the years before, you could see that, you know what I mean, and recognize that. So when the opportunity came, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, what was the moment that it clicked for you that you said, all right, I want to do this thing and go to Penn State?
That's a good question. There was a lot of conversations with Coach, and he wanted to be sure too. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to make it sound like I was being, incredibly courted. You know what I mean? Like a credit to him, and he should in his chair, is to make sure that's going to be a fit for him too. And so there's just a lot of authentic conversations. That's the best way to say it. And so there was a moment when Coach came to my house and sat down with me and my wife, and we were just talking, and we had some really vulnerable, organic, authentic communication. Totally transparent about what he expects, me totally transparent about what I would want to do, you know what I mean? And like recognizing that the dots were going to connect. That was the first thing. And then the second thing was I had an opportunity to visit with the staff. And so the offensive coaches. And so I got to spend time talking to each of them. Because as you know, right, like that's a huge part of it. The offensive staff that I work with, they're phenomenal. And you want to make sure that those people are aligned with what Coach is, and that all has to gel. And I think that's something that Coach has done a great job of here, is just making sure he's putting together a complementary staff. So it was those two things. It was interaction at my house that he had, that we were both super transparent about what he thought it needed to win football games, and what he needed. And what I thought, I needed, and then the interaction with the staff are the two things.
When you got to Penn State, then, first couple of weeks on the job, what was the thing that surprised you the most? You have this idea of what it's going to be like at Penn State.
Yeah. So I would tell you that I get here. I don't know that I was surprised. It's hard not to say you're surprised with the fanaticism that surrounds the Penn State family.
You're a celebrity day one here.
A little bit to that, but and that's part of being a divisional coach. But like it's the flagship school in the state. You know what I mean? And so the fans and the way they are and the passion that they have. That I don't want to say I was surprised by that, but it's still, when you see it and you feel it, it's hard not to be like kind of have a reaction. But I remember going and I'm watching practices, and so they were preparing for the bowl game, and I was kind of in an observatory role a little bit and learning guys and seeing how they interact, but just watching and how physical they were as a football team. You know what I mean? And that was something that I was like, yes, and it was at that time of the year, right? So it's they're about to play their 13th game. And they still have the physicality piece, and they're developing players that maybe didn't play as much throughout the course of the year. Those two things really stuck out right away when I first got here.
Yeah. In your first offensive unit meeting, and you're implementing what your offense is going to be, what are the things, maybe the pillars of your offense when you're explaining every, day one install? You're like, hey, we're going to be this on offense. What is that?
Yep. So the first thing is I tell them, like, here's the elevator pitch of what we want to be philosophically. Is that we want to be a multiple pro style offense that uses spread concepts while showcasing the skill sets of the players. Okay. And so that's the elevator pitch. Well, what does that mean? It's just kind of a nice little, right? You know what I mean? Something you put on a wall maybe. I say to them, I said, guys, the scheme that we do really is going to be secondary to how we do it. And the four principles that we want to talk about with our players is, the first thing is we have a mantra. We say, don't talk about it, be about it. In a world of, hey, we say we want to be explosive, we say we want to not turn the ball over, we say we want to do this, we say we want to play in the NFL, we say we want to be whatever, an all-conference football player, whatever that is. So our actions have to align with that, right? So be a person of action, number one. Number two is that we have to train ourselves in a way that when it gets hard and when this thing grows and when it comes stressful, we can rely and trust on our training, right? And so as coaches and as teachers, part of our responsibility is that we lay that out and that we are training our players on the fundamental things that they need to rely on day after day, okay? You know what I mean? So that's the second thing. The third thing, and this goes to the how we do it, not what we do, is about approaching all of this work with the right attitude and the right enthusiasm. And if you look on that wall over there, right, there's the core values of this program. And Coach asks a lot of times, he goes, ask players, which of these is the most important to you? And to me, it's the positive attitude. Because really, if you're not doing anything without the right attitude or sense of urgency, you really probably aren't doing it to the best of your ability, right? And then the last piece is our ability to daily improve. And 1% better is something you see around the building a lot. And to actually be specific and explain that what the players are. We ask them those. Here we are in spring football. In every practice, we give our players a 1% goal. So I said, it's not the scheme. It's not that we're going to run 4 verticals or that we're going to run outside zone or we're going to run gap schemes and power or option or whatever it is. It's the fact that we're going to do it. We're going to talk about it, or be about it, not talk about it. We're going to train ourselves in the right way so that when we get different or odd looks, we're going to make it right. We're going to do it with the right attitude, and we're going to every day just work on getting better. And so regardless of what we do this game, if we do those four things, we'll have a chance.
It'll work out.
Right? You know what I mean? We'll have a chance. If not, it doesn't matter. We can run the best scheme in the world. It's not going to work out the way we want.
I want to ask about Drew Allar. Obviously the face of this program right now, and had a great season last year. Also had moments, I'm sure, that you're like, we got to be better in that situation. How has he been this offseason? What's kind of the next step for him that you're working with him on?
So first of all, he embodies exactly the things I just talked about, right? The idea of getting better and improving and having a growth mindset, really, right? Is what we're really discussing. He recognizes, he owns any area that he wants to get better at. You know what I mean? He doesn't get defensive about it, and which I think it was one of the most important things to want to be a pro. You know what I mean? To get better is you have to be able to look in the mirror and say, here's something I want to improve on. And so he's been a really good player. Well, how do we go from being really good to great? You know what I mean? And so a lot of times that's the margin, right? Right? Improving somebody who's a brand new football player to our program, the things that they have to do to get 1% better are a lot different than Drew. Drew's 1% goals are very detailed and specific versus somebody just getting here. So he's said before the things that he wants to work on. I've been so proud because last off season he was kind of coming off of a season where he got dinged up and he'd really get to do it as full. And this is my first spring with him that I get to see him do the whole spring, and he's full speed and he's running around like super athletic, which is huge. It's something I know that he wanted to work on. His ability to process and go through reads and progressions, his way to get us in the right play It's a superpower of his. His approach mentally to the game is probably it's the best I've ever been around.
Yeah.
You know, right? And which is pretty special because I've been an offensive coordinator for 20 years now. You know, so it's cool to see him. And when I talked about before, so don't talk about it, be about it. Drew's being about wanting to be a pro. He's being about wanting to be the best quarterback. You know what I mean? That he can certainly be. Which for him, his ceiling, being the best, it should be one of the best in the country. Yeah. Right. And so I've been so proud of his intentional approach this spring towards wanting to get better.
Yeah. I'm sure a big focus of yours this offseason has been the wide receiver room and just getting more playmakers around Drew. You brought in two guys, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross. How have those two guys been? How's that room? How would you evaluate that room right now as we sit? Real quick, guys, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to fire on sports. I've tried all the different apps, sports books, daily fantasy. Prize Picks is the way. On Prize Picks, you're picking players instead of teams. So if you know sports like I do, you can make a bunch of money, especially with the free $50 bonus with code NEXTUP or the link in my description. All you gotta do is deposit $5. You get a free $50 in your account that you can use, go 10X, 100X, turn it into whatever you want. Code NEXTUP, $50 bonus, link in description. Let's go. You brought in two guys, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross. How have those two guys been? How's that room? How would you evaluate that room right now as we sit?
Super pleased with how they've gone through this spring. And I've been better for them about making sure we're putting them in positions to succeed. But, you talk about Devontae and Kyron, both have come in right away, lived up to the standards that this program has and elevated them in some regards, you know what I mean, to what we're doing in terms of our expectations of preparation and, going out there and how we practice. So I've been very pleased with them. I think you look at Liam and how consistent he has been, and I'm really looking forward to him having the kind of year that I know that he has wanted, right? Because of what he does and his understanding, the way he does things. And then you have another group of guys who have been a little bit younger coming through. And I'll leave out names in this process, so I want to be careful, not to even say any. But that next group of guys have come through, the amount of reps that they've been getting, their daily growth and improvement, and they've kind of embodied those four things I talked about earlier. Willing to do anything necessary to get on the field and help.
Yeah. You're just from watching your offense last year and in college football, you're known as one of the more creative offensive coordinators in the country, of just coming up with different ideas and being multiple on offense, like you said. Where does that creativity come from? Is it watching other teams? Is it just laying in bed at night thinking about plays?
Well, we certainly steal plays. You know what I mean? Like I think all great coaches do. We want to steal anything that we've seen on film from somebody else or watching whatever. Internet, I don't care. Twitter, like
high school teams.
Seriously, we've taken plays from high school teams in the past. Like whatever you see that we think can help is good. It has to stay within the framework of what we're doing. Fundamentally, this creativity piece that people talk about, we're just trying to create stress on defense, right? And anything that we can do, all right, to do that, we want to incorporate it, as long as we're not compromising some of those things I talked about earlier. As long as we're not compromising, we're asking our players to do things that they haven't been trained to do, right? So at the end of the day, any scheme that you run, any play that you call, there's an investment on that, right? And usually that investment is it's in the form of time, right? So how much time did the O-line coach spend coaching these blocks? How much time has the tight end coach spent, or the receiver coach, or quarterback coach? All these people, all these players have to invest time. And so what you have to be careful of is creativity is if you invest a bunch of time into some of this stuff and the return on it isn't worth it, then that's when that's when you start swimming upstream. And so fundamentally what we're rooted in is substance, right? And these creativity pieces are because that we are really good at doing some of the generic things, vanilla, if you want to use that word, whatever, well enough for us to feel comfortable that, hey, we don't need to practice another rep of 4 verticals. Let's practice a rep of, the tackle coming in motion and
tackle over.
Stuff like that, right? And so we're able to do that because we have players that want to do it, right? And buy into it. But it's rooted in putting stress on the defense.
Do you have fun in the install meetings when you have like a new concept that is creative and like we're putting Tyler Warren at center and like
Absolutely.
players love it.
Yeah, and I work with it. Yeah, and I encourage them to say, you got an idea, run up the flagpole. Why not? And then the assistant coaches, you know what I mean? The guys I work with, I go, our limitations are imagination, right? And if you bring it up and it's good and it makes sense and the investment is going to be worth it, well, let's do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As long as we don't become, again, as soon as we get labeled as not being of substance, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah. How do you balance as a play caller in game risk as a play caller? Like when you're taking a shot, when it's, hey, let's just run inside zone on 1st and 10. That's probably the most important thing you got to do during a game. When are you running those gadget plays that are the kind of, left hash only, like, how are you managing that throughout the game?
Well, you kind of want to, hopefully if you can, prescribe it, right? Knowing that, hey, when we get to this spot, maybe you feel like it's going to be something you want to wait for the second quarter, the second half, whatever it is, we're going to get it called. And again, you have a plan to use it and call those things. I think the most important thing that needs to happen, though, of course, is that you're actually running enough plays so that you can find a rhythm to be able to call those sort of things. That's when it has to happen, but you can't be just willy-nilly and just, dial it up at any time, and it's got to fit. And the reality is they're only good plays if they work. If they don't, it's whatever, you go on the next one. But I tell our staff, I go, okay, so let's say you run a reverse, you didn't really spend a lot of time on it and you gain 1 yard. Well, there's 1,000 snaps of college football teams handing off an inside zone play that gains 1 yard and nobody thinks twice about calling it a second time or, you know what I mean, or that they actually called it. So as long as the return is good enough on the investment, call it. You know what I mean? And again, have a prescribed number going into a game of what you want to do within the game plan.
When it comes to evaluation, that's such a big part of your job, right? Is evaluating players to bring into this program, specifically quarterbacks. And you've been around some great ones, as we talked about. What are the things that you look for on film for a quarterback to decide if he can play in your system? Yeah,
well, first of all, accuracy, right? There's a huge piece, right? Are they able to complete the ball? Are they able to complete balls, that are in different locations of the field? That needs to stick out. The arm talent piece, mechanically, you want to see people that are pretty, fluid in how they're throwing the football. Not that those things can't get corrected or fixed, but you don't want to have them fix a bunch of things when someone shows up on campus. The ability to extend plays, right, with your feet and your athleticism. The throwing component is first, and the athleticism component is added value. There's a minimum bar in each of those areas that we want to hit. It's kind of a spectrum. Those are three things for sure that you want to see on film. And then as you dive and dig deeper into the individual, their understanding, their football acumen, you know what I mean? How much do they like the game and enjoy the game? Like I said, we want the quarterbacks that we want to recruit, we want them to be able to play pro football and all of what that entails. And you don't see really at our level that where it's like, oh, we're just going to do this, you know what I mean? Just throw it up. Like that's not necessarily a thing. So you want to see somebody who has a passion for that strategy part of the game and daily improvement, and then all the character components that you would think of about some of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. The leadership that they had, the competitiveness piece, their ability to relate to their peers and communicate and those kind of things are all part of the evaluation process.
I talk a lot on this show about overcoming adversity in your career, and I was just talking to Coach Franklin about it before this. Anyone who's reached your level of success at some point in your career, you've had to overcome something, had to overcome some piece of adversity. What's a moment in your career where you had to overcome something, and how'd you overcome it?
There's a lot. Like I joke all the time. I've probably called tens of thousands of plays by this point in my career, and there's been thousands of them that have been bad. You know what I mean? And so learning how to respond to that is it's something everyone has to do, I think, especially if you're going to call plays or be a coach. I would tell you this: I have been fortunate enough in my career to have been 15-0 and won national championships. I've also been humble enough to be 1-9 as a play caller, and the things that we do are rooted in success and failure, most importantly. But to think of a specific example in my life of like, this adversity, this moment, it's hard because there's such an
constant.
It's like whatever. Whatever. Every practice, I feel like you know what I mean. I have some sort of adversity that I have to overcome. But certainly, I would tell you, dealing with failure as an offensive coordinator, losing games, not being productive on offense, it certainly helped form who I am today.
Yeah.
Now, I was fortunate enough that I worked for coaches that were patient enough with me to allow me to fail. And gave me the opportunity to fail, specifically John O'Grady, who was my head football coach in college, he was the first guy to give me a chance as an offensive coordinator. I think back to, because that was 20 years ago now. And if I ever see any of those guys, I'm like, I just look at them, I say, I'm sorry, man, gosh, I was just an awful coach back then compared to what I am now. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I got to be so much better for you guys. And I was blessed to be in a situation where someone gave me the opportunity to fail. But I would tell you, most of my career was rooted in failure. You know what I mean? To figure out how to do it right. By messing it up first.
What's the best piece of advice you've received in your career?
Oh man. This will sound cliche, but I think it's really important. Is be who you are. You know what I mean? Be authentically you. I think, and of course I could say that now because I'm in my mid 40s, right? I'm married, and you know what I mean. But like there was a point I remember early in my career when you felt like you had to do something and be something that you're not. I think a little bit kind of maybe the question you asked earlier about the creativity and stuff. Well, I like that. I like using my imagination. I like working around guys who, are curious and, hey, why are we doing this way? Right? Like I want to be in a room with those people and I want to think that way. And that's who I am. I feel like, again, but I don't know that I could ever define that when I was 30. You know what I mean? I can now, but perhaps trying to be somebody that I'm not. You know what I mean? I enjoy coaching and teaching, and there was a period probably as a coach that I don't know that my players knew that I enjoyed coaching and teaching because I was, I approached it probably the wrong way sometimes, and again, that's part of some of that adversity I think that you had asked earlier, and to grow from that, I think that's probably the best piece of advice, which I think people have given since the beginning of time. You know what I mean? Figure out who you are, but I think it's ultimately you got to go through some trials and tribulations to answer that question.
Last question for you, Coach. I appreciate your time. What are the things that you want to see from your offense this year in order to reach the top summit of college football? Well,
I tell you, obviously you have to the main stats that everyone's going to talk about are offensively you can't turn the ball over. You got to be explosive. You know what I mean, right? And you got to score points. Okay, I think we all know that, and those are the stats that really drive winning and losing. But when people watch us play, what we really I want people to say is that they see us, they go, that's a tough team, right? That's a tough offense. That's an offense that's super stressful to defend. One, because of the things that we've talked about, maybe the way that we put stress on the defense, but also because of the personnel, the players, the guys they got to tackle, the people they got to cover, et cetera, the blocks they got to get off, right? And then the last piece would be that the guys, they're explosive. You know what I mean? At any moment, they'll pop a big one on you, right? So being tough, stressful, explosive that's really what I want to see on film. And you can't do that unless you execute at a high level and all those kind of things.
Have great players. Right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Awesome. Well, Coach, appreciate all your time.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad you're in town.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you a ton. Yep.
Wasn't too hard, right?
That was great, man.
Next up.